Thank you all so much for dialing in today. Like I mentioned, it's always so fun to learn alongside each other and just sort of take this fun little learning coffee break together. And today we're going to be learning all about how we can make hiring our superpower and building our dream team, which is so great, so needed. And this is very exciting because a core goal of Dreamers and Doers is always to amplify you and your journeys. And one of the ways we do that is through facilitating game-changing educational events like this one that give us all the opportunity to up level together. So before we officially begin, I want to share a bit of background information on our esteemed expert. And before I do that, I have to give a personal shout out and endorsement to Christina, which I know she's going to be talking about later, but we actually worked with Christina for a couple of our most recent hires, and it totally changed our hiring game. Like, it was like the puzzle pieces all fit in, and it's just been like a breath of fresh air throughout the past few months. I'm really excited for you all to learn from her amazing expertise. Onto her bio, Christina is an operations expert generalist who is passionate about teams that are oriented around kindness and empowerment. She discovered the best hires were sometimes the worst at interviewing, while amazing candidates on paper had huge performance issues. So through experimentation in her previous startup and consulting for other small businesses, Christina has developed a unique methodology that focuses on a matchmaking strategy and savvy evaluation steps that are more equitable and effective. She loves finding hidden gem talent and mentoring leaders to build and manage their own magical teams. So with that, I will hand it over to Christina. We are so excited to learn from your expertise today. We know how valuable your time is, and we're so grateful to you for investing in Dreamers and Doers in this way.
Hello, everyone. So I'm like a OG Dreamers and Doers member. I love all things Dreamers and Doers. I'm so excited to be here. So I have a presentation with some slides, and I'm going to go through some of these slides that have a lot of information quickly. So here I'm going to drop in the slide deck for future. If you want to reference anything and go into the details, you can. Oops. Okay. So we're really going to be talking about how to hire not from resumes and interviews, but some smarter strategies and better evaluations. So great intro, but also I personally am so passionate about hiring because I felt like I could never get hired. And then if I did get hired, people didn't really know what to do with me. And that's one of the things that I love to bring into the hiring process is how do you find those unconventional candidates? Maybe they're marginalized, maybe they're neurodivergent, maybe they just have some great strengths that can transfer to what you're looking for. How do you actually find those great people? And let's just start by saying you're going to be wrong. So as a small business, one of the things that's given is that things will change. And that when you're going into the hiring process, that's really important to know is that what you think you need is going to be wrong. And so what you're looking for is some different things other than like a typical role and responsibilities. And kind of taking that pressure off of, I'm trying to find a great person who can kind of get these things done. That's just a great mindset to go in is like, I'm going to be wrong. I'm going to think I know what I need, and I'm going to learn a lot through this process. And so finding people who are kind of more adaptable and are going to be able to roll with you through that process of figuring out what does this role look like and what do we really need, that's going to be really huge. So there's a couple traps that I love to call out here. So one of the big ones is it sounds great. So and some of the questions that you all put into the form, this is a big one. So oftentimes what happens with resumes and interviews is that you're going to get a lot of ideas, and what you're really doing in those types of formats is, can they sell you on their ability to do the job, not whether they can actually do the job. So there's some better things that you can do. So think of it more like a band. If you were trying to hire a guitar player, you wouldn't talk about whether or not they could play guitar. You would sit down and you would jam together. You would get an experience. You would also maybe, instead of talking about just ideas, you would actually start to work a little bit together, whiteboard some stuff, break it down, not just from the idea, but into how would they approach it? How would they think about it? What would be their thought process and what would they do? You can also go into data and what are the metrics that they have achieved? What results have they gotten? So all of those things kind of help you think more about the less of the it sounds great and more of it actually is great, because you've had these mock scenarios or these mini projects. And it depends on kind of how senior of a role it is. Sometimes you can actually do like a paid trial or a paid project. Sometimes I've had, ourselves or clients, pay for these little teeny tiny, like, $25 little, we call them missions is what we call them. We make it really fun and human, where it's like, do you want to accept our mission? And so we make it really personal and human. But the goal ultimately is that you're trying to experience each other. And so thinking about what you need to get done and what do you need to make sure that they can do. So another trap is that you like them. So this comes back to a couple different aspects. Usually this is based on bias, but it's also the things that make you great at what you do are probably more in the realm of strategy, ideas, being a visionary, being in that dreamy space. You're really looking for someone who can complement you, be more of a doer. Maybe they're logistics, maybe they're, climbing the mountain with you. They're going to be like ready to go. They're ready to try things. You're really not looking for more senior people who are kind of like, oh, I'm ready to, be more of an advisor and kind of step back. You really, especially in the early stages of a company and a smaller team environment, you're really looking for more of those doers. And maybe as you grow, if you're a little bit more established, you do want some more strategists and you do need somebody who has more of those ideas, visionary bits, but you're still always looking for somebody who can take things off your plate, who can do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So you're looking for people who you might enjoy them. You might have those similar values alignment, but if you're like, oh, I really, really like them, I really feel like I resonate so much with them, it's probably an indicator that you're resonating with them because they're really similar to you. And so you want to try to find people who complement you and are different from you. The other concept here is thinking about this as a matchmaker would, like literally in dating. So instead of most job descriptions and the way that people approach hiring is through a checklist of roles and responsibilities, requirements, and it's so boring and it's this box. And people are not boxes. What you're trying to do is you're trying to find that win-win. And that's going to give you a leverage point of standing out in the way that you frame your job listing. It's going to allow you to find really great people and treat them like humans. They're going to be so loyal. They're going to feel, I can't tell you how many people feel undervalued and underutilized. And if you can really appreciate and value them and make a role that they love, that's why so many people are going through the Great Resignation right now, because they're so tired of sacrificing because they're stuffed inside of boxes. So if you can look at this more from that approach of we're going to find that win-win. What are those business needs that someone great could meet? The other factor here is we did this a lot, with our clients. It's what do you need to get done instead of what's the role? You can think about the role as more of a marketing approach. How do you frame what you need to get done in a way that people are going to identify with it and understand what you mean. But get to the baseline. What do you need to get done? And that's like in the realm of a virtual assistant or an executive assistant, so broad. What do you actually need to get done? Okay, so they need to schedule things. You want to send them Voxers, and then they're going to put together the checklist of what needs to get done that week. They're going to post things on social media using your templates. Like, what do they need to get done? It's like step above what the task list is. What do you need for them to do? And then find people who love that stuff, and then prioritize. There might be things that you're really, really needing this to get done, and then some other things that be, oh, nice to have. So be that matchmaker instead of making it a really, really tight box of a role. So let's talk about timeline. I think people don't necessarily realize how much goes into hiring. And so I want to kind of give you a general scope, and it really depends. This is a timeline you can make really tight, or a timeline you can expand. The fastest timeline that we do internally in our team sometimes is 3 weeks. And that's really, really tight. So give yourself the space to do it right, because the hassle and the stress and the strain of not hiring correctly is going to be worse than if you don't invest that time. But sometimes it can take up to 6 weeks for a full campaign, sometimes more, if you're really trying to find someone senior, if it's a more technical role, if it's in person is very hard to hire right now. So, and then some people might need to give notice. So all of those different factors, this kind of is a timeline you can stretch or make smaller. Like if you're looking for interns, maybe it does take, 14 days, but you still really want to take what I'm going to show in the next part of the process. You want to kind of make it more simple, or you want to kind of expand it depending on how important of a hire this is. So the main pieces of a hiring process is the strategy. And I think a lot of people just go ahead and they jump right to the build, and they're like, oh, I just need to put together a job listing. It's like, whoa. What are you actually looking for? So first, going into the strategy bits. So you want to figure out first, what is your growth bottleneck? What's that biggest, most important thing that you need to move the business forward? And then from there, think about who's on the team, what are they doing now? And maybe this is just you, but what do you need to get done? Prioritize that, and then think about those skills and what sort of training might be needed for that. You can also reflect on past and future hiring and what you can learn about who's really going to be a good fit on your team, as well as what can you leverage about your team, your environment, your company. So this strategy piece, don't underestimate it. Really start to think through some of these pieces before you even start going into that build mode. And the build includes job description, an application, and some sort of mission, some sort of evaluation step that lets you experience them. So it's not just telling you, it's showing you and getting to experience them. And then that evaluation process happens where I highly recommend human messages that feel like real and do not ghost people. This is like such a huge thing that a lot of people are really frustrated with is, be human and treat them like a real human. You want to have some sort of tracking system. It could just be a simple spreadsheet. There's a lot of other tools. I'll mention them in another slide. And then some sort of interview. Usually by the time that I get to an interview, I kind of already know who to hire. So the interview is really that sense of how does it feel to relate with them? Any last questions that I might have lingering that I'm trying to understand better? And then an optional thing that we started to do is we call it the scorecard, where we do it 2 ways. So we actually send it for some of our clients, 2 candidates to rate the opportunity. And then we also do it internally to rate the different candidates. And it kind of gives us, again, that win-win. a glance into that. So finding some ways that you can add some numerical values to things, even if it's just kind of like characteristics, you're rating each person, it kind of gives you some numbers and some data. We also put that feature into our missions, where we rate different parts of the missions, how do they follow instructions, any other factors that are really important to kind of rate people on. You can kind of then get some numerical values to help you with that decision making. Lastly is onboarding, which is also so important as part of the hiring process, really making sure that they get set up for success. And the main thing here that I would suggest is expect mistakes. Tell them you're going to expect mistakes, and teach them and empower them and mentor them. And feedback. Feedback is so key. So that's kind of the general hiring process. You can really streamline this where it's very simple, or you can really make it a little bit more expanded into kind of, an 8-week process. So those are the main bits to think about including. Okay, I see some questions. Okay, I'll get to those in a moment. So job description, what should you include? So I really love to think about job descriptions very differently. It helps you stand out on job boards. It helps you really kind of, it's the best moment to convey what's great about this opportunity. And I like to look at that as like similar to your company, but this role or this team, like why would someone love to be on your team? The other factor that we've been doing is put together these being and doing personas. So similar thinking in terms of a marketer. Who is that ideal candidate for your team? Really being able to see them and conveying that in the job description so that they can also see themselves. And this is super duper important for DEI, but also for results. When you include the compensation range, it's more equitable. And it increases the number of applications by a lot. We've done some testing where we don't include it or include it. It's just massively huge for results. And this is just some like recommended structures, some different bits that we like to include. So starting off with some just different like characteristics, values, behaviors, some sort of compelling company description, and then the role logistics, and then responsibilities is really, again, focusing on what needs to get done. And then some different skills that might enable someone to thrive to get those things done. And then why it's awesome to join your team. And again, like sometimes you might not have a huge budget to find someone, but there's other things that you can leverage to really showcase why your company is amazing. So that's what the job description is for, is really including why is it great to join your team? Maybe it's not compensation, but maybe it's other aspects. Like we have amazing people on our team and we're still very small, but they love our team. They get so much mentorship. They get so much training. They get so much, they feel so appreciated, and they get to work with other amazing people. And then there's other roles where it's in person, it's kind of technical, and they do have a budget. And so you can really, kind of pay really well with compensation. So look at those different, levers that you can pull to attract some really quality candidates. There's some additional tips and links here that I have linked to as well in the slides. And then sourcing. So there's kind of two aspects of sourcing or of hiring. So there's the sourcing, which is trying to get people to apply. And then there's, okay, so they have applied. How do I figure out who to hire? That's recruiting. So I've kind of talked a lot about the recruiting bits where you have to have a really solid strategy and really great evaluation principles. This is the sourcing. So it depends on how some different factors of sourcing. Sometimes this is easy, sometimes this is hard. So if it's like an executive assistant remote role from a really great values driven company, you can expect to put on a job boards and get 200 to 300 applications. If it's a very technical role, if it's in person, If it's more specialized in terms of skill sets, it might be harder to get that many candidates. I always try to aim for a minimum of 50 applications. That way you have a really solid, diverse, strong candidate pool. But I have made some really strong hires in the like 10 to 20, application range. So, yes, that's a great question about the DEI compensation. Okay. So sourcing, one of the things is it's testing. How do you frame this? Where are those people? Who hates their job, and how can you find those people? Again, what are those transferable skills? So sometimes when we're A/B testing, we modify slight little things and it makes a huge difference. So I'll talk about a tool that I love, but you can actually A/B test multiple job listings at the same time using an applicant tracking system. And you can get some really great data about how many views are people seeing your job listing, and then how many people are applying. And then one of the biggest things is maybe your biases or your criteria is just too rigid. So you need to be a little bit more open-minded to try to find some more quality candidates. And then if you're trying to do direct outreach, like it's really hard right now. I've been talking to some of the top recruiters and talent acquisition sourcers. Like they get less than 1% conversion rate. It's hard if you're trying to do sourcing for a really technical role. Okay, and then I included some different, obviously the Dreamers and Doers Facebook group is amazing. But I also included a bunch of other, I get results on free job boards. People are like, really? You get results on Indeed? I'm like, yeah, actually, if you have a really solid, evaluation strategy, you're going to find some great people and you're going to put them through your process and it can work. There's also some premium job boards and some DEI based job boards that are all sorts of different awesome, little niches there that I linked to. And then tools. So for applicant tracking systems, one of the ones that I love the most is called Workable. So Workable, it posts to Indeed, to LinkedIn, to Facebook. Well, they've stopped doing to Facebook. I'm very annoyed. So they post to a bunch of different places, and then it all collects into one place, and it makes it a lot easier to manage when you have a lot of applications. Some other ones, if you're kind of more doing ongoing hiring, you can find some different tools. These are a couple that I know of, but for the most part, if you're just doing one at a time, Workable is really great. If you want to go outside of the US or kind of local, you can use Upwork because they have a really great kind of international platform. Some of the functionality is a little bit limited, like you have to stay in Upwork. You can't message them outside of that. But if you do use Upwork, I highly recommend the $29 upgrade where you can then reach out to people. That's going to be a really great feature there to utilize. So high level tips: map out a clear strategy before you start. Add some sort of mission steps to your evaluations. Apply those marketing and matchmaking principles, and then focus on resourceful, experimentative doers, those people who can be that complementary counterpart to your dreamy visionary, who are going to be adaptable, they're resourceful, they're going to roll with you through the ups and downs. And they're going to be like, you know what, I'll take a little bit of this and I'll take a little bit of that. So those are some high level tips. And then wanted to offer some free calls. So if you want to do like a quick free no pitch strategy call with someone on our team, we are happy to do that. And then if you want any support, we also have a link where you can talk to me. So those are some links I will drop into the chat. And I'd love to go now through the questions. Well, we're asking some great questions. So, okay. Hannah, do you want to flag for me anything that I should definitely cover?
Yeah, so Kira had an awesome question. What are your key strategies for evaluating how well new hires will fit into the corporate culture? I recently hired someone who sounded like she would be a great fit, but now that she's 6 weeks in, is showing that in truth, she's not.
So there sometimes are these outlier situations where someone has withheld information, but for the most part, what you're really trying to do in your evaluations of hiring is being really, first, the strategy, really clear about what you're looking for, who you're looking for. And then in the evaluation, trying to get to that show, don't tell, really experiencing them, because sometimes people, they might be really great at selling you on things, but you want to try to experience them. So Rosario, I'd love to hear an actual example of what kind of role was this for?
My map. No, basically we are contracting developers, growing the team because, well, we are growing no matter what. Then I saw that people who, I'm very hands-on, no matter what I'm doing, I love to be part of the thing. And when contracting younger people who is just or starting or people who never met me before in person, like they don't know how to act and how to, I'm very transparent as a culture. Everything, everybody should work openly so we can jump in if there is something needed. Then I decided, I saw that that's difficult to understand when you are not in person, you are only remote. Then I decided to ask to write this letter of instructions. I'm just testing it. And first thing is interesting for me to see how former employees saw me. I mean, how they feel that should know, that anybody working with me should know before working with me and my team. And the second thing is, of course, is easy for people to know, well, if you don't know how to work this way, it will be difficult for you because the culture of the organization is, we are always delivering, we are very busy, having a very transparent inside of team, whatever. And that's what I found, that I will let you know how it works in some weeks.
So developers, actually, for very technical roles, there's a lot of assessments out there. So that's kind of on the skills side. But what I'm hearing, and I'm seeing Jamie's comments as well, is that in addition to the actual skills, you're also testing for soft skills. So for example, sounds like one of the pieces here is accountability. So one of the things in our missions that we always include is that there's some really clear kind of step-by-step instructions for how to get started, including they are supposed to give us an ETA before they start. They need to track their time. And then we determine whether or not when they submit their mission, whether they've met the ETA that they said they would. So that's one way we can kind of like, again, you're trying to draw out what do they need to be able to do, not only in the skills, but in the way that you work together. So our team and a lot of our roles, like we have kind of step-by-step checklists. So then I would try to test them, not just on being able to do what's in the checklist, but following the checklist. And then if, let's say, you know, you have some different things that's part of your culture or part of that accountability piece, like how do you give that, you know, an experience? So I'm trying to think of a something specific here. Like accountability, it's the ETA. I learned so much from that piece. It's also like, it's in that being and doing persona. I'm trying to get to the essence here of who I'm looking for. And so that's, if that's one of those traits, looking for that at the top and then seeing, you know, what kind of questions can you ask in your application? What kind of questions can you put in that mission or in the interview to talk about examples of what does accountability mean to them? How have they dropped the ball on accountability, and what did they do to self-correct? Or maybe what's underneath accountability, especially in remote work, is self-management. So if your culture and your team is really reliant on each person really being communicative and self-managing themselves and their time, that's something that you need to be asking, like, how much experience do they have working remotely? What are their personal project management, self-management practices? They start to get really detailed of like, oh yeah, like I put everything into my Google Calendar and I have a project management system, and everything's very organized, and I have due dates, and I always make sure that I get things done by the due date. And like, you know, I'm checking my priorities every week. Like, that's somebody who obviously knows how to self-manage themselves. And if they give you kind of a vague answer, they're kind of like, like they start to think about it, that's like an indicator it's probably not something they think about. And so you might be trying to look for other indicators, like, are there any other red flags that this is not something that they're skilled at? The other piece of this that's coming to mind is, think of it in terms of archetypes. So sometimes if you're looking for somebody who's more creative and you need somebody who's really, really logistics oriented and tech savvy, you might struggle to find those two archetype types together in one person. So sometimes it's just kind of being realistic about that archetype or that persona. What is realistic for one person to be able to do? I know on our team, accountability, communication, being self-managed in remote work is just so key and detail oriented. It's like, we can train them on the skills, but those foundations are really important. So, okay. Let me know if I answered that question. There was a couple of you that had a kind of a similar question there.
Gigi had a question. She asked, can you say more about DEI compensation?
Yes. So I really love to think about what needs to get done, and then I research job titles. So it's almost reverse. Instead of like, oh, I think I need so-and-so, and then what are the responsibilities? It's the reverse, where it's like, what do we need to get done? And what's the job title that's going to best frame this? And then I do research on Glassdoor, on salary.com, looking at what are those median, compensation ranges. The other thing that we like to include a couple of different places in the job description template that we have is a lot of mentions that if you don't meet all of the criteria or all of the skills requirements, please still apply. We're looking for, we say over and over and over again, looking for diverse candidates, really looking to find great people. And because there's so much research that especially women, they don't apply if they don't meet 100% of the criteria. And so making it really clear that we're looking for people who don't necessarily have to meet all these things. These are just kind of a list of what we're looking for. That can be another aspect of finding more diverse candidates.
Amazing, thank you. Jamie had a quick follow-up to the accountability questions you mentioned. So I'm gonna let her potentially unmute herself or drop it in the chat. I'll give her a second.
Hi, Hannah. Thank you so much. Sorry, this couldn't have been more timely. This is such a TMI, but I feel like Dreamers and Doers is such a safe space. I'm going to give the shortest version ever. I have a web developer who I absolutely adore, and I decided on my launch a while ago because it was my 1-year anniversary. He went on vacation, so I hired someone else to basically click launch on the back end because I don't know how to code if my life depended on it. I can't even make this up. I've been working with this guy for a month. He's been great, more or less. And I always said it's a priority for me about communication because we're all working remotely, and that I expect you to, respond immediately, but within an hour or two. And he lives in New York. I'm in New York, so you can't really use time zones as an excuse. So 2 days before the launch, which I've been working for 2 years on, he's like, I'm not feeling well, this, that, and the other. but made it seem clear, like the day of the launch, he'll be available. Not only did he not respond to me for 2 days, I legitimately thought I was concerned for his health. I thought he was in the hospital. The day of the launch, he just ghosted me. It was horrible. And so the guy that I was depending on, and that happened. Another time I hired someone, I onboarded her, I trained her. She was based in India. And then the person who was supposed to do the job didn't work out for her. So then she couldn't do it for me. Like web developers. So to your point, Zara, and I've spoken to other web developers, they're like one of the flakiest people apparently. And it is the most unbelievable, frustrating thing because it's not, I can't do it. Like if it was email marketing or social. So I guess just to follow up on the accountability, you know, everyone can say, I'll be there, I'll reach out. And they've all said that to me. Is there any, I really liked your idea of the ETA and the parameter, but I'm of the mindset, like, you know, give them more than one shot. And maybe I'm too trusting and too kind, or I don't know why, like I always give people the benefit of the doubt. Like, is there anything that you found that is a real true test of I'm there, I'm accountable, like I'll show up? Because that honestly gives me more anxiety than most things in my business, is people saying they'll do something and then not following through. And it's just nightmare.
Yeah. So my my partner is actually in tech, and right now it's crazy pants. Like anybody who's technical, who's a developer, is getting so hard recruited. It's like,
Yeah.
They have the keys to the kingdom. Like right now, it's just the worst. Unfortunately, that is creating some weirdness. And so technical hires right now are just really, really tough. I would say that, so referrals and references are tough because you really have to know the person you're asking the referral from.
Right. Because they're only going to ask from people that are going to say rave reviews. And it's like,
yeah. And so sometimes that can be good though, if you're trying to find people through referrals that you know have worked really well. The other thing that you can do are increments of trials. So instead of taking them at their word and putting them on something really important, I know that was like a situation, it's kind of like you didn't have much other options.
Yeah.
But if as much as possible, like giving trial, like leading up to more important moments.
Yeah.
That way you can really vet people thoroughly, because it's really tough when, you know, and kind of thinking of the buyer's market in real estate right now, it's a candidates market. And especially for if you're technical, you know, you have technical skills, a lot of people are looking for you.
Yeah, no, that helps. I think to your point, the trial, and it's funny, I had that with him and he clearly failed. It's so crazy. Like I was calling him, texting him, and I was even angry. I was like, are you okay? Like, this just was like kind of crazy behavior to just completely go MIA. Yeah. And I emailed him on yesterday even, and I haven't heard back from him since like Sunday morning, where he was just like, I'll get to it, and then just never did anything. And I still haven't heard from him, which I think is just like kind of crazy. Like that not even to say like I'm alive, or like it's just, yeah. And it's just really disappointing because again, you know, you invest your time and your energy with the hiring, the onboarding and all this, and it's just not only time consuming, but emotional. And so this has just really been helpful to hear some actionable steps for vetting. Because to the point you made earlier is I definitely make decisions when it comes to hiring that are emotional. And I need to kind of, so thank you.
So I would make that like criteria list of the, you know, how to track on accountability, how to track on, you know, communicativeness, and then putting some numbers through that in that evaluation process. So it's not just so emotional, but it's like, okay, I have some numbers here. That's for every candidate that we put through, we have a total of their mission score. And so it's not just what we're seeing in our biases and how we feel about them. It's also looking at the data.
Yeah.
How are they performing?
Yeah. That's been really helpful. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. That's a great idea. You know, Gabrielle, it's like, Gabrielle, it's like that contingency plan. Like it's one of the things that I love thinking about a, you know, kind of unique approach to team structure. I think some people are really afraid of part-time roles, and I have put together this dream team of part-timers. They get to do more of what they love. They get the flexibility, they get the freedom. One of our core values is freedom, to do work on their own terms. And then if someone, you know, is out of capacity or they get sick or something comes up, then someone else can grab it. And we get to work together, we get to support each other. And so I'm a big fan of like part-time, you know, contingencies as well.
To your point, I'm so excited to hire a full-time person. Right now, I'm the only person working on a full-time, and that's the other piece, right? They have one foot in, one foot out. I would love to have at least a few people that have both feet in. But to your point, again, it's this vetting, and I've done a poor job because I trust my emotional judgment too much.
And I've heard this a lot from people, but all of the people who are on our team that are part-time, they're all in. Like I don't think it's necessarily whether they're full-time or part-time. I think there's also an empowerment piece of it's sometimes even in the language that I use. Our team, this is our business. This is, you know, not just my team, it's our team. And I help them make decisions. They get to feel included. They get to feel like they are building this with me. There's also a really big distinction that there's a difference in promptness that I think a lot of times people struggle with. If they're not full-time, then they won't be available. It's like that. I think I've found people who are very prompt, and that also gives me the feeling of, they're there.
Right.
And I set reasonable expectations. Like, you know, like you said, you being communicative about what those are, seeing if that works. But, you know, I think it can definitely work for part-time. It's just kind of in the framing and finding really great people who want to build something great.
Yeah. Is it too high maintenance to be like, because now, again, since I've been burned, I'm now even more sensitive.
Yeah.
So I use Slack. I know my walls are now just going, with Slack. I love Slack, and it's just so easy. It's like it's like a text, so especially on your phone. Would it be too outrageous to say, you know, respond within 2 hours? And the response doesn't even need to be an answer to the question. Just, I see this, I got it, I'll get to it. Like that to me is the most difficult part, because obviously in person you could just swing by a desk, right? Where we don't have that anymore. So if I just don't I've never wanted to be that like annoying person or high maintenance. Like, do you think if I said, hey, an expectation is just understanding that you received the message, I know you're busy, but I just want to know it's on your radar so that I don't have to ping again tomorrow, even though maybe you're working on it, but I don't know. Do you know? So I'm nervous about going to be annoying.
It sounds more like you need a project management tool. Like Slack is great for DMs or chatting, but I get that data with what you just described in our project management tool.
Like a Trello.
Yeah, I love ClickUp. Trello's great. Asana's great.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I'm picking up. I'm going to stop talking. But this is
Yeah,
really
we
helpful.
have
Thank you.
a few more questions. Rosario, I see your hand raised. I'm going to head over to Alice and Gigi, and then we'll go into Rosario's question. Alice asked, do you recommend hiring multiple candidates at the same time for one job to test them out?
I have done this, and it has actually worked really great. You have to have more bandwidth to manage them, and you have to have kind of a generalist approach to hiring and to what needs to get done. It works really well for like admins or marketing or operations or some of those things where it's like there's a lot of different skill sets that you could look for. And I also, the framing is important, that it's not a competition. It's like, if all of you succeed, there is a place here. We're trying to make it, and it also creates a lot of bonding. Like they get the people who kind of do that trial and do that training together, they really get very close and they support each other. So I've actually had it work really well.
Awesome. And Gigi is wondering, how can we be more sensitive to people with performance anxiety in an interview? A lot of people with interview anxiety can be overlooked.
100%. Some of the best hires, they've like literally been shaking and crying on an interview. That's why I do the mission, because I could see before the interview, they had top scores. They were amazing. And so when I got to the interview, they were so nervous. They didn't convey themselves very well, but I knew going in, I was just like, this is not an indicator of their performance. This is an indicator of it's a very nervous situation. And just also then from the empathy perspective, I knew that they had had a previous work scenario that was really traumatic for them. And so I could kind of understand, oh, that probably is coming from some of that. So I knew going in that I'd probably have to do some more confidence building, some more kind of just mindset mentorship, and helping them believe that they're really great. And that was when it ended up happening. And she followed me around from lots of different roles and companies, and she's really thriving now.
Rosario, feel free to jump in. I know you had a question.
No, I was just adding that it's not necessarily developers the problem, but managing a profile like that, highly in demand, without having the technical skills. Some people takes advantage of the clients in terms of having too much, accepting too much because it's in high demand. But of course, it's hard to manage developers. That's why we started the company this year, 2 years ago, but this year full-time growing the company to be a technical team for non-technical founders, because we realized there is a huge need, and selecting people maybe could be easier for what they say and sell. I completely loved Christina's presentation because of that. And the other thing is the hands-on work that they can do. And you can only evaluate that when you are also a developer.
This is a really great topic where how do you hire for a role that you don't actually know how to do or know what to look for? So one of my favorite things to do is to do research and to find a subject matter expert and try to ask them, what kind of questions can I be looking for? What kind of things do I need to be asking and looking for? And what are their responses that are going to indicate that they actually know what they're talking about? Because I don't know whether they're giving me, legit answers or not, because I don't know anything about it. So that's one of the things that we do with some of our clients when we are not experts on that role. We'll go and find a subject matter expert and we'll get some of those insights and that data to know, what do we need to look for? What do we need to ask? And in their responses, what should we be looking for?
Amazing. Thank you everyone for asking such great questions. We have a few minutes left for questions if anyone has anything else they want to drop in the chat or unmute themselves. Katerina has a question.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to expand on my comment and just briefly discuss accessibility. So as a disabled public speaker and consultant, I talk about hiring and the workplace a lot on LinkedIn. And I hear frequently from people who, they're struggling, they're disabled. It's hard for them to get a job. And it's not that they can't do the role, it's just really that stigma and discrimination in our society. So one of the things I hear is that, someone had a story, they asked for closed captions ahead of time. They show up to the meeting, there's no closed captions. The person wasn't aware. And then Zoom is very tricky. Hannah knows you can't just fix it right on the Zoom. So they did everything right, but the company wasn't set up. So I was just thinking about how important this is. And it's not just closed captions, there's other things, of course. Just being able to make sure that people are getting an equitable opportunity. So I would love to hear from you on anything you can say about how you bring in accessibility into the interview process, whether that's thinking about different types of disabilities that might be present, or what you're asking people to do for the missions, and just hear your thoughts on that.
This is such a great topic. I am not an expert on this specifically, but one of the things that we always try to ask is seeing it, how would this go for someone else? And what might we be assuming is true for, based on our privileges or our abledness, like what are we assuming that someone else might struggle with or might be impeding us to actually get a sense for their genius? And so in the missions, that's definitely something that our team always thinks about, is even something as simple as, including a video as part of the mission. Somebody might not have that technology capabilities, or it might be that they need something extra in order to make that work for them. So we always try to add in a little blurb before interviews of, if there's anything that you need, we are open to requests. Oh, the other thing that we include in our very first email is that we link to a page where we talk about our hiring philosophy. And if anybody wants to read more about that, we include some very explicit, like, WEAR stands for DEI. We want to accommodate if you have any needs. And so we try to make it very explicit that we are a safe space and we will do everything we can. Unfortunately, not every company does that or is equipped to do that. But as much as possible, like, being vocal that you are a space that wants to hear this. And, we're trying to always inform ourselves, but, it's like, also, what do you need? Like, tell us and we're going to try our best. And so the other thing that I really love is I love to get feedback. So whenever someone has declined, if they're like a top candidate and they decline something, or they've just kind of given us some feedback, we always bring that into our team and say, what can we do better here? And I think that's something that it's easier for us because we like do hiring all the time regularly. We can get better and better and better, but it's something that I have in the back of my mind of like, how can we do some better resources on this so that people can learn from what we're learning? And so, yeah, Katerina, if you have any suggestions or ideas, it's definitely not an expert, but I always try to do better.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up, Katerina. Very, very important. And thank you, Christina, for addressing that. If there's any final questions, we can perhaps take one more. There's been so many great questions in this session. Thank you, everyone, for coming with such great questions. And thank you, Christina, for sharing your incredible knowledge with us. There's so much here, and we appreciate you sharing how we can connect with you further, and for sharing the link to your presentation, which I'm actually going to share one more time in case anyone didn't receive it the first time, so you can dive into this all. Oh, I did not get the link.
I also forgot to share the links of if you want to talk with me or my team. And then I'd also love, I've been spending a lot more time on LinkedIn. So if anybody wants to just connect.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This was so great. Hiring is kind of wild, and it's fun to see the behind the scenes of how to have an effective hiring strategy. So thank you so much. This was a really, really great opportunity to learn, and so grateful as always to up level together. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next one.